The journey of the sovereign nation, known as the Osage, begins not in the archives of federal treaty negotiations, but in the cosmology of the Ni-U-Ko'n-Ska, the children of the Middle Waters. Long before their encounter with European empires, this people maintained a worldview governed by the pursuit of universal balance. According to ancient oral traditions, their ancestors descended from the sky to the earth, organizing their society into two grand divisions: the Tzi-sho, or sky people, and the Hun-kah, or land people. Led by a hereditary line of chiefs, these divisions established an earthly order under the guidance of Wah-kon-tah, the great mystery spirit. From grandfather sun and grandmother moon, the Osage derived their social structure, their spiritual rituals, and their deep connection to the geography of the American continent. The ancestral territory of the Osage east of the Mississippi River encompassed the lush, forested Ohio Valley region, taking in portions of modern-day Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and western Illinois. Sometime prior to European contact, the tribe permanently crossed the Mississippi River, settling near modern-day St. Louis and occupying the Cahokia Mounds region. They were identified as a Degehah-Siouan language-speaking tribe, a linguistic family that also includes the Omaha, Ponca, Cow, and Quapaw. As other Degehah groups split off to follow different migratory paths between AD 900 and 1250, the ancestral Osage remained as the final Degehah group at Cahokia before eventually shifting westward around AD 1300 to focus their settlements in Missouri and Kansas. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Osage lifestyle successfully blended the agricultural practices of eastern woodland societies with the nomadic traditions of Plains Indians. They lived in permanent agricultural villages along the Osage and Missouri rivers. But twice a year, once in the summer and once in the fall, the entire community transitioned to the western plains for bison hunts. The summer hunts focused on gathering meat and fat, while the fall hunts secured the thick winter coats of the bison, which the women meticulously tanned to create elaborate robes, moccasins, leggings, and dresses. Osage warriors, who were historically noted for their tall physical stature, often exceeding 6 feet, wore their hair in a roach style, shaving their heads except for a precise scalp lock about 2 inches high and 3 inches wide, running from the crown to the nape of the neck. Physical prowess, combined with the rapid adoption of horses and firearms, allowed the Osage to establish themselves as dominant geopolitical brokers west of the Mississippi. Their early contact with European explorers was documented in detail by Frenchmen such as Louis Cortombert in 1836 and Victor Texier, who lived among the tribe in 1839 and published Voyage aux Prairies Osage, providing invaluable records of Osage medical practices, village hospitality, and spiritual ceremonies. George Catlin's 1834 portrait of Chief Black Dog, Chong-Ta-Sab-B, in full regalia, holding traditional weapons at Fort Gibson, remains an iconic visual record of this powerful era of Osage autonomy. The expansion of the young American Republic came at a catastrophic cost to the sovereign nations of the West. Following the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the United States embarked on a systematic campaign of land cessions. For the Osage, this meant the forced abandonment of millions of acres in Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. But the U.S. government's resettlement policies were highly volatile, frequently shifting different tribes onto the same occupied lands. To make room for the exiled Cherokee during their Trail of Tears, the federal government forced the Osage out of their remaining Oklahoma homelands under the Treaty of 1839. It was a policy of forced removal that tribal elders described as stirring up a massive hive of bees, shaking it violently to see what would happen. The ancestral lands of the Osage were rapidly dismantled through major treaties in 1808, 1818, and 1825. Missouri's achievement of statehood in 1821 resulted in the immediate removal of over 5,000 Osage West into Kansas. However, the federal government's creation of a permanent Indian territory created immense friction. Under the Treaty of 1839 at Fort Gibson, the Osage were forced to cede their remaining land in Oklahoma and relocate back to Kansas, a maneuver designed to pacify the region for the incoming Cherokee Nation. When Kansas was subsequently opened to white settlement in 1854, The cycle of encroachment restarted, and by 1872, the Osage were forced to relinquish their Kansas lands. Rather than submitting to a standard federal reservation allotment, Osage leadership executed a highly sophisticated real estate transaction. Using the proceeds from the sale of their Kansas lands, they purchased 1.65 million acres of land in Indian Territory, modern-day Osage County, Oklahoma, directly from the Cherokee Nation. Crucially, the Osage held the title to this land free and clear in a fee simple. Chief Wah-kon-tah famously declared that his people would find peace and happiness in this specific terrain, recognizing that the rocky, rugged scrubland of northeastern Oklahoma was undesirable for white agricultural homesteaders. This geographical calculation was designed to immunize the tribe from further non-Indian encroachment. This sovereign insulation was threatened by the Dawes Severalty Act of 1887 and the Indian Appropriation Act of 1889, which authorized the allotment of tribal lands and opened the surrounding surplus territories to white settlers. The historic Oklahoma Land Run, beginning on April 22, 1889, flooded the region with over 50,000 settlers seeking to claim 2 million acres of Indian land. Because the Osage owned their reservation in fee simple, they successfully resisted the initial waves of individual land allotment, buying time to formulate a highly sophisticated legal defense. In 1896, Osage Chief James Bighart signed a 10-year blanket lease that allowed the Indian Territory Illuminating Oil Company to begin drilling beneath the reservation. The subsequent discovery of immense petroleum reserves transformed the rocky scrubland into a geological gold mine. Wiser from decades of broken treaties and federal manipulation, the Osage entered allotment negotiations in 1906 with unprecedented leverage. They refused to accept the standard Dawes Act terms. Instead, they negotiated a legal masterstroke. They divided the surface land equally among every individual member of the tribe, multiplying their land holdings and leaving absolutely no surplus land for white homesteaders. Most importantly, they kept the entire mineral estate collectively owned by the tribe. Every oil lease, every drop of petroleum, and every dollar of royalty would belong to the Osage Nation as a whole, distributed equally through a system of perpetual head rights. The Osage Allotment Act of 1906 legally separated the surface estate from the subsurface mineral estate. A final tribal roll established in 1907 recorded exactly 2,229 members. Each enrolled individual received one head right, which represented an equal 2,229th share of the income generated by the collective Osage mineral estate. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, acted as the trustee, collecting lease royalties from private oil companies and distributing the funds quarterly to head right holders. Crucially, the 1906 Act prohibited the sale or transfer of head rights, intending to keep this mineral wealth permanently within the tribe. However, head rights could still be inherited, creating a dangerous legal loophole. The physical epicenter of this commercial explosion was Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where lease auctions were held under the shade of a giant elm tree known as the $1 Million Elm. Oil barons like Frank Phillips and E.W. Marland bid millions of dollars for 160-acre tracts of unexplored land. In 1924, a single tract sold for a record-breaking $1.99 million. The resulting wealth was unprecedented. During the peak of the boom in the 1920s, every Osage man, woman, and child on the roll received the equivalent of approximately $400,000 per year tax-free in modern dollars. Newspaper reports of the era detailed the lavish lifestyles of Osage citizens who resided in sprawling mansions, wore expensive fashion, and hired white chauffeurs to drive luxury automobiles. This sudden accumulation of wealth generated intense envy and predatory greed among local white populations. In 1921, the United States Congress codified a system of racial subjugation disguised as financial protection, declaring that any Osage of half-blood or more ancestry was incompetent. The federal government mandated that local white guardians be appointed to control their wealth. This guardian system invited systemic corruption. Local county probate courts routinely declared competent Native Americans incompetent. Prominent lawyers, merchants, and politicians legally siphoned off millions of dollars from their wards. But embezzlement quickly turned to cold-blooded murder. Because head rights could be inherited by non-Osage heirs, a network of local conspirators realized that they could inherit entire fortunes simply by marrying Osage women and systematically executing their families. The local probate courts of Oklahoma wielded absolute authority over the personal fortunes of Osage citizens, frequently designating individuals as incompetent based on highly arbitrary criteria. In one documented instance, a guardian was appointed for an Osage woman simply because her disciplined savings habits suggested she did not understand the value of money, demonstrating the systemic absurdity of the program. This state-sanctioned financial vulnerability quickly escalated into a systematic campaign of physical elimination in Fairfax Township during the 1920s, a period widely termed the Reign of Terror. The primary target of the most notorious conspiracy was the Kyle family, citizens of the Osage Nation. In May 1921, the decomposed body of 36-year-old Anna Brown was discovered in a remote ravine in northern Oklahoma with a bullet hole in the back of her skull. On the exact same day, her cousin, Charles Whitehorn, also known as Charles Williamson, was found shot to death near Pawhuska. 2 months later, in July 1921, Anna's mother, Lizzie Q. Kyle, suspiciously died of suspected poisoning, with local coroners ruling the death as a natural result of old age. In March 1923, Anna's sister, Rita Smith, and her husband, Bill Smith, were killed when a high-power bomb destroyed their home in Fairfax. This left Molly Burkhart as the sole surviving heir to the family's accumulated head rights. Molly was systematically poisoned with corrupted insulin doses, a plot designed to pass the entire family estate to her husband, Ernest Burkhart, and his uncle, William K. Hale. Local conspirators did not limit their targets to the Kyle family. Other wealthy Osage individuals, including William Stepson and Tilly Powell Morrison, died of suspected poisonings in 1922 and 1923. Henry Roan, an Osage cousin, was shot to death in a ravine in 1923. Anyone who attempted to investigate these deaths or carry evidence to federal authorities was systematically executed. Barney A. McBride, a white oilman who traveled to Washington, D.C. to seek federal intervention, was abducted, bound in a burlap sack, and stabbed to death. W. W. Vaughn, a prominent local attorney representing Osage estates, was thrown from a moving train. This reign of violence was protected by a wall of institutional corruption. Local police, sheriffs, coroners, undertakers, judges, and prosecutors were either directly on William Hale's payroll or actively participating in the embezzlement of Osage estates, ensuring that the vast majority of these suspicious deaths went completely uninvestigated. Bypassing the corrupt state apparatus of Oklahoma, the Osage Tribal Council petitioned the federal government for help in April 1923. The Young Bureau of Investigation, directed by a politically vulnerable J. Edgar Hoover, took the case. In 1925, Hoover assigned the investigation to Tom White, a veteran lawman and former Texas Ranger who represented the transition from raw frontier justice to modern, systematic forensics. White realized that to break the conspiracy, his team had to operate completely in the shadows. He deployed an elite undercover team, posing as insurance salesmen, cattle buyers, and oil prospectors, slowly earning the trust of the terrified Osage community. Through meticulous handwriting analysis of forged wills and the collection of physical evidence, White dismantled the empire of terror ruled by William Hale. Thomas Bruce White Sr. was born in 1881 in Travis County, Texas, the son of Robert Emmett White, a frontier sheriff. Growing up in a log cabin in a region of raw frontier justice, White watched his father execute a hanging, an experience that deeply shaped his commitment to objective law enforcement. He enlisted in the legendary Texas Rangers, serving from 1905 to 1909, before working as a special agent for the Santa Fe and Southern Pacific Railroads. He joined the Bureau of Investigation in 1917, representing a unique bridge between Old West tracking skills and modern police science, including early applications of fingerprinting and handwriting analysis.